Welcome back, Little Nightmares. It's me, Queen Nightmare, and I'm going to be reading a Drarry story. And hi, it's me. It's been a while, I apologize, but I have been doing homework, and I am actually 1 week ahead of everything what I have to do for my work. So, I was recommended a story just recently. It's called Expect the Unexpected by _Voldemort_. But let me tell you how I found it. It was recommended to me. I'll find the comment and put it on the screen, or if I can't, thank you to this person, they'll comment down below and maybe I'll pin the comment. I'm not very good with this stuff. But how I found it was through someone commenting it, and I do look at your comments from time to time, and if you have an actual specific one, I will read it, and more often than not, I will have it in my reading list in under the folder requested to read. And if you ever see my stuff on my Wattpad, you can go see it for yourself, that under my requested to read, that if there's a specific story, comment down below on anything, like my social media, my Discord. People at my Discord are joining, so welcome. and even on Wattpad, or even on you can contact me personally, like any of my social medias, basically. But if you can't, it's all good. And you can always just comment. Just comment. I know I haven't been able to get back to a lot of people. I apologize, and I just wanted to apologize for that. Anyways, when I was looking for the title of this story, the second title down for the title, it was a Tony X Steve. If you don't know who that is, it's Tony Stark X Steve Rogers, and I went, that's not something I want to think about right now. So yeah, it was a journey to find this. And when I read this to my friend, he was just like, wait, what? He had the same reaction that I did. Here's the description. The original story by Phoenix Strike on Archive of Our Own. I don't take credit for this absolutely wonderful story. Cover photo by Up the Hill Art on Tumblr. Be sure to check her out. She's pretty awesome. Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. It's pretty much, they're saying the slash. Harry just wanted one normal year at Hogwarts. He should have known that normal is for other people, not him. And this time, it's not even his fault. What's an 18-year-old boy? What's an 18-year-old boy who also happens to be a virgin to do when he suddenly discovers he's pregnant? Yeah, that's the description of the story. So let's get into it. This is a disclaimer. I do not own this fanfiction in any way possible. I found it about a year ago, and I just loved it so much. The original story is on Archive of Our Own, and is by Phoenix Strike. They literally write some of the best written stories that I have ever had the privilege of reading. I highly recommend going to AO3 and reading all their stories, which I don't know what it is. Is it like a website? I might have to do it. And giving them kudos. Aw, that's so sweet of you. They're the best. Oh, and they even have the link. I'll have to put the link too when I'm editing this. Oh yeah, this is an MPreg, by the way. If you don't like them, don't read them. By the way, I'm into MPregs. Like, I think the person who was like commenting down below under the video that was like saying it's an MPreg, but it's a good story. I'm like, wait a minute, but I say I like male pregnancies? I don't know what it is. It's like giving me a glimmer of hope or something. Anyways, chapter 1. Surprise! Frig. This story is obviously male pregnancy, but it's set in a world where wizards can't fall pregnant just because they're wizards. This is an astronomical rare occurrence in Harry's world. He bit down on the boy's neck, causing him to cry out in a combination of pain and unadulterated pleasure. He knew he shouldn't be doing this, but it felt too amazing to stop. He thrust deeply, wildly, as every ounce of self-control he possessed snapped. He was getting close now. He could feel the tingling begin to spread through his body, the familiar sensation of his balls tightening as his body prepared for finishing. With a final deep thrust into the other boy, he stiffened, releasing a hoarse cry as he finished, spilling himself into the tight canal. He felt strong hands weave themselves into his hair, and then he was being pulled into a kiss, one that was both soft and passionate, a sense of contentment that had been all too rare, recently washed over him, far sooner than he'd have liked. The kiss ended. He slipped out of the other boy, and still panting hard, climbed off the bed and began searching for his clothes. Now fully dressed, he turned to his lover, ready to declare how utterly fantastic that had been, but the words died on his lips. Instead, he simply gaped in horror. The euphoria he was feeling drained away instantly. No. His bed partner just laughed. It was an unpleasant sound full of taunting, the expression contorted into a sneer. Surprise. I'm sorry, Madame Pomfrey, but did you just say Harry is pregnant? Hermione squeaked. The Hogwarts matron surveyed the scene in front of her. Harry was laying on the examining table in the hospital wing. His ever-present best friends either side of him. Ron was white-faced, which emphasized the freckles on his face horribly, as his blue eyes bulged slightly with shock. He was holding onto the headboard of the bed as if in need of the physical support. Hermione Granger, hair as bushy as ever, cheeks flushed, her face holding the expression anyone familiar with the girl had come to associate with pre-exam nerves, was holding Harry's hand in her own, a grip so tight that her knuckles were chalk white. And then there was Harry himself. He was propped up on the bed with a pillow, looking faintly green, A combination, no doubt, of the recent constant vomiting and the news he had just received, looking as if Voldemort himself had suddenly returned from the dead and broke into the school. He suddenly startled everyone by bursting out in laughter. Hysterical! Madame Pomfrey, he said incredulously. He was currently feeling laced into every syllable. But it's still months until April Fool's Day, you know. I'm deadly serious, Mr. Potter, she replied sternly. Harry scanned her face, looking for a hint of a lie. He wondered who had put her up to this. Was it George? Of course not, Harry reminded himself. George hadn't been the same since the Battle of Hogwarts and the loss of Fred. I need to congratulate you on your complete, accurate diagnosis. Pregnancy is clearly the obvious conclusion. I really should have suspected it myself, except for two tiny little details. For one, I'm a virgin, and for another, I'm male. It is not something I've ever come across in all my years of practice, Madame Pomfrey said. But there is no doubt whatsoever, Mr. Potter. You're pregnant. I've performed the diagnostic spell 3 times because I didn't believe it myself, and each time it's displayed a positive result of pregnancy. Then there's something wrong with your charm, Harry yelled, feeling his cheeks flush. I'm a bloke! I have a bloke parts, and I highly doubt that if God wanted to send the next Messiah to Earth, he'd choose me to carry it. So, how the bloody hell did I get pregnant? I honestly don't know, Madame Pomfrey replied. Harry noticed she looked as agitated as he'd ever seen the usual unflappable matron. But there is certainly nothing wrong with the charm work. You are with child, Harry. I need to speak to the headmistress. But before I do that, I would like to perform 2 specific diagnostic spells designed for pregnancy, if you're agreeable. Sure, why not? Harry sighed. It's not like they're going to reveal anything because I am not pregnant, Harry knew he sounded rude, but he was getting irritated now. Irritated with Madame Pomfrey for actually believing he could be carrying a baby. Of all the stupid things he'd ever heard. Okay, so he'd heard pregnant women were sick in early pregnancy, and he's been feeling grody for weeks now with nausea and extreme tiredness, but people had to have had sex and girl bits for pregnancy. He met neither of those criteria. Madame Pomfrey pointed her wand at Harry's bare abdomen and uttered, "Repertum gravata." Harry watched in morbid fascination as his stomach emitted a periwinkle blue color that was intensely bright. His stomach felt feverishly hot, then suddenly ice cold. But the light faded from him completely. But instead of disappearing, it formed a cloud that hovered mid-air. Harry blinked a few times and realized this cloud was forming words. He felt himself gape in blank shock. Detection of the viable pregnancy. Positive. Number of fetuses. 1. The matron waved her wand again. Tempus gravata. More periwinkle light that in any other circumstances Harry would have described as beautiful. However, at the moment, the light was nothing except terrifying. The fetal age, 6 weeks and 3 days. Gestational age, 8 weeks, 3 days. Conception estimate, 2nd September 1998. Estimated date of delivery, 26th May 1999. I can't. How did... Oh, fuck. Harry babbled, barely noticing Hermione's grip on his hand had intensified so much she was now crushing it. I don't understand, he whispered. Disbelief was flooding through him. He realized he was shaking violently. I'll leave you for a few moments, Harry, Madame Pomfrey said kindly. I'll go and speak to Headmistress McGonagall. With your permission, of course. But I think she really needs to know about this. Harry simply nodded, too dumbfounded to speak further. Okay, then I'll be a few minutes. I don't know how this happened. I've never done anything with anyone. I swear, I'm telling the truth, Harry said desperately. Once the door to the hospital wing closed, he realized his eyes were brimming with unshed tears. We believe you, mate, don't we, Hermione? Ron said. Hermione nodded her head vigorously. Of course we do, Harry. And there's bound to be a logical reason for this. I remember reading in Healing Through the Ages that there have been 3 other documented cases of male pregnancies in the last 700 years. Hang on. I'll just have to run to the... If the end of that sentence was library, then please don't bother, Harry said warily. Even if there have been a few freak cases, it doesn't explain how I ended up pregnant. Pregnant. He was pregnant. There was a baby growing inside him. Bile rose up in his throat with alarming speed, and his stomach churned. Oh, pass me the kidney dish, Ron. Ron got the metal dish under Harry's chin just in time before Harry was sick into it. This was all too much to take in. His head was spinning with the information he'd received in the last half an hour. "I'm going to have a baby," he said out loud as he wiped the corners of his mouth with his blanket, whilst Hermione vanished the contents of the kidney dish. "Oh, gosh. You know we'll be there with you every step of the way, Harry," Ron said sincerely, gripping Harry's shoulder in the supportive way. "You're not going to do this alone. You'll always have me and Hermione and Ginny and Mum and Dad. We'll help loads too. You know how Mum is around babies. She's going to adore this." Harry forced a weak smile that was fooling no one. Then the door to the hospital wing was flung open, and Professor McGonagall, thin-lipped and her hair pulled tightly back into a bun, strode into the ward. "Oh, Potter," she said as soon as she saw Harry. Her voice was gentle, sympathetic. "Why do these things always happen to you?" Then she strode around the bed and stood at his side, and did the last thing Harry was expecting. She took him into her arms. "Don't worry, Potter. You'll have the support of the school. I'll personally ensure that." Madame Pomfrey cleared her throat. "Harry, if it's okay with you, I'd like to perform a paternity test to find out who the fetus's other parent is." "Other parent?" Harry repeated. Madame Pomfrey smiled. Harry thought the smile was slightly patronizing, which didn't help improve his current mood one single bit. "Yes, you know, it takes two people to make a child, Mr. Potter." "I know that!" Harry shouted, "which, aside from me being a boy, is why I can't understand how this happened. As I've said, I've never had sex with anyone, or even, been naked with anyone else." Harry's cheeks were burning with embarrassment now. "So how can there be another parent?" "Actually, Potter, I have a theory about how you came to be in this situation," Professor McGonagall said. "This is exceptionally rare situation to the point where it's not been seen in a few centuries, but it's not unprecedented. And if I'm right, then there is another parent involved." "Fine," Harry said, and screwed his eyes tightly shut. If he concentrated hard enough, then maybe he could pretend he was in Gryffindor Tower in his own bed, that he had just had the strangest and most ludicrous dream and hadn't woken up yet. "Just go ahead, do whatever you like." "Harry," Madame Pomfrey's voice forced him to abandon the thought. "As you may know, Muggles determine paternity after the birth of the child through testing of DNA. But we don't have to wait until the birth. There is a charm that will reveal the parents of the child whilst he or she is in utero. I can do that right now, and then we'll take it from there once they're identified." For the third time that hour, she pointed her wand at Harry's stomach. Paternitas. More colored light. More gentle this time, though. Harry thought, like a warm glow, rather than a dazzling bolt. It was a soft lilac. Its wispy consistency reminded him of memories just before they were dropped into the pensive. After a couple of minutes, the smoke rose from the air as, as before and began to form letters. Parent 1, Harry James Potter. Well, the child is definitely biologically yours, Harry, Madame Pomfrey said. Harry was barely listening. He was too busy focusing on the smoke, which was rearranging itself once more to form more letters. A collective gasp filled the room. Hermione let out a small scream, whilst Ron groaned and flung his hands over his face, shaking his head almost violently in evident disbelief. Madame Pomfrey and Professor McGonagall began talking very rapidly, urgently, in whispers, but Harry was paying them no mind. He was struggling to comprehend what he was reading. It simply wasn't true. He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes, hoping against hope that when he replaced them on his face, he would see a different name, but no such luck. There, in 3-foot-high letters of lilac smoke, was written perfectly clearly the last name he wanted to see. Parent 2, Draco Malfoy. Chapter 2, Knocking Up Harry Potter. Please, please tell me that Malfoy and I aren't having a child together, Harry said weakly. For what happens perhaps the 20th time in the last hour, he felt faint and more than a little sick. If he had anything left in him to bring up, he was in no doubt he would have done so several minutes ago. In fact, please tell me this is all some hideous trick and Noel Edmonds is about to pop out at any second and yell, "Gotcha!" Unfortunately, this is definitely no trick, Professor McGonagall said. And who is Noel Edmonds? Harry didn't answer her. He was sitting in the headmistress's office, alone except for Professor McGonagall. Ron and Hermione had been ordered back to the Gryffindor common room. Madame Pomfrey had gone to the dungeons to collect Draco Malfoy, the other parent. Harry's brain helpfully supplied. Harry thought back to this morning and was suddenly desperate for the time turner to go back to a time where he just blissfully thought he was ill. Rather than Merlin, he couldn't even think the word pregnant. Hermione and Ron had practically frog-marched him down to the hospital wing after Ron had found Harry passed out on the floor of the bathroom of the boys' toilet, white-faced and dripping in sweat, having evidently just thrown his guts up. It wasn't by a long shot the only time Harry had been sick in the past 3 weeks, but it was the first time he'd not managed to hide it from his friends. Hermione had revived him, and she and Ron had both ignored Harry's protests that he didn't need Madame Pomfrey. The matron performed her diagnostic spell, frowned, and instead of the pepper-up Harry was expecting to receive, dropped the bombshell of the century on him. Yes, life was much easier this morning. He jumped slightly and looked up as Madame Pomfrey, accompanying a confused and nervous-looking Malfoy, entering McGonagall's office. Professor? Malfoy began. Madame Pomfrey said, You needed to speak to me urgently. Is this about my mother? Is she well? As far as I'm aware, Mr. Malfoy, your mother is fine. Professor McGonagall replied, not unkindly. However, there is a matter of supreme urgency I need to discuss with you. She gestured her hands to sit down, and Malfoy did. Only then did he seem to spot Harry, already seated. He started slightly, his confusion evidently growing. Potter? What? He said, but Professor McGonagall held up a hand to silence him. Harry looked away, suddenly finding it impossible to fix his gaze on the boy in front of him. Mr. Malfoy, can you please tell me what your relationship with Mr. Potter has been like since term started 6 weeks ago? Harry spluttered at the word relationship. He chanced to glance at Malfoy. His arms were folded, and he was staring at the floor. He had the appearance of a person who would rather be anywhere than where he was currently. Potter and I haven't spoken to one another since term began, he said. It was the perfect truth. There had been none of the heated animosity. Potter and I haven't even spoken to one another since term began, he said, and it was the perfect truth. There had been none of the hatred, animosity each held for the other during their early years at Hogwarts, since they had arrived for the start of their 8th year, as some of the teachers called it. Instead, both Harry and Draco had come to an unsaid agreement for each of them to just leave the other well alone. I don't understand what any problem Potter has includes me in, or vice versa, Professor. Harry noticed Malfoy was deliberately avoiding his gaze. Good, he thought. Let the git feel uncomfortable. That tallies with what Potter has told me, said Professor McGonagall. What I have to tell you will come as an even greater shock. There's really no gentle way to break this to you, so I'll just say it. Mr. Malfoy, as unbelievable as this may sound, Harry is pregnant, and spells have determined that you are the child's biological father. Harry hadn't thought it possible that Malfoy's porcelain skin could pale any further, but he was wrong. Every drop of blood drained instantly from his face, leaving him looking deathly ill and sallow. Harry noticed he was gripping his arms of his chair incredibly tightly. Harry wondered if Malfoy was about to throw up. He was perfectly still. In fact, Harry thought he looked every inch that he was carved from marble. Pregnant? What do you mean, pregnant? Malfoy said in barely more than a whisper. Harry, suddenly furious, found his voice. You know, Malfoy, pregnant, knocked up, with child, up the duff, in the family way, bun in the oven, expecting. Is that enough euphemisms for you, or would you like me to continue? Harry didn't know why he felt so venomous when this was clearly as much as a shock to Malfoy as it was to him, but all he knew was this was all somehow Malfoy's doing, and Harry hated him at that particular moment. I know what the word means, you idiot, Malfoy replied. I was just, you know what? Never mind. What do you mean, Professor? That Potter is pregnant with my child? That's absolutely impossible. I've never even so much as hugged him, let alone anything else. And he's a boy. Thanks for pointing out the bloody obvious. 10 points to Slytherin, Harry drawled. Malfoy was still refusing to meet his eye, and this was making Harry extremely angry. Look, I I don't know how this happened, and I'm not exactly delighted by it myself, okay? It's impossible, Malfoy repeated. When it comes to Potter, Mr. Malfoy, we should all know by now that the impossible is achievable, Professor McGonagall said. It should have been impossible to survive the killing curse once, let alone twice. Robbing Gringotts is supposed to be impossible. Defeating the most evil dark wizard who has ever lived with a simple disarming charm learnt well before OWLs should not have been possible. Yet, Potter has achieved all those things. Yeah, and that makes me feel so precious and special, Harry said sarcastically. But this time, I'm not the one who's done anything. I don't know how you did this, Malfoy, but you've done something, and now we're having a baby together. This is your fault. I haven't done anything, Malfoy protested. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat. Actually, Mr. Malfoy, if my theory is correct, then this is down to certain behavior on your part, she said, silencing Harry with a look as she opened his mouth to say something at that. Although there is no way you could have been expected to foresee this happening. So to say it's your fault per se is perhaps unfair. I'm going to have to ask you some deeply personal questions. I'm afraid I require the absolute truth. Truth and Malfoy are incompatible, Harry muttered under his breath, but Malfoy and the headmistress gave him a look. Harry shut up. Malfoy. Draco, I'm sorry to ask you this. Professor McGonagall continued as if Harry hadn't spoken. But have you had sexual contact with any students since the start of the school year? Malfoy's face, which had been so white from shock, flooded with color, and he looked deeply uncomfortable now. Does Potter have to be here, Professor? I'd much rather he left before I answered this, Draco said. Mr. Potter will be staying, Professor McGonagall replied sternly, before Harry got a chance to speak. This matter, after all, greatly concerns him, and he has a right to hear it. Now, please, answer the question. Fine, Draco said incredibly quietly. Yeah, once. He threw his face into his hands, but Harry could still see the blush seeping out from behind his fingers. He was clearly mortified. And was there polyjuice potion involved in this encounter? Professor McGonagall asked. Harry's head snapped up. Yes, Draco replied, and his voice was barely audible. He was still refusing to look at anyone. Harry gaped at him in disbelief, as did Madame Pomfrey, whilst Professor McGonagall looked as if this was exactly what he suspected to hear. Although I didn't know that until after we'd finished. Perhaps, Draco, you should start from the beginning, Professor McGonagall said. 6 weeks earlier. Malfoy? Draco froze, but didn't turn instantly around. He knew that voice. Of course he did. It belonged to the person he thought about than anyone since the Battle of Hogwarts. He took a deep breath and turned around slowly. Potter, what do you want? To talk. Potter's expression was unreadable, his green eyes boring into Draco. He turned and walked away, heading to the stairs that led up to the 7th floor. There was no question Draco wouldn't follow. He caught up to Potter as he was pacing in front of the all too familiar wall. He suddenly felt dizzy and realized his palms were sweating. I can't. Potter, you cannot seriously want to talk in the room of requirement. I mean, after, well, you know, does it even still work? The appearing door answered the question, and Draco was loathing to appear frightened of the room, if Potter wasn't. Apparently, saving each other's lives hadn't. Draco froze, but didn't. Oh, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay. Apparently, he took a deep breath and followed Potter into the room. It could have been any of the four houses' common rooms, although the coloring and the decor were neutral, and enough to as much distinguish which was small, but incredibly homey. Draco thought. There was comfy, squishy armchairs, a large roaring fire, and a shaggy cream-colored rug laid on the wooden floor. It couldn't have less resembled the room of hidden things, for which Draco was extremely grateful. He felt himself relax, although not fully. This was still the room in which he nearly died just 4 months previously, where Crabbe, idiot that he was, did lose his life. And he was still here with Potter. What did you want to discuss, Potter? He asked. Potter's mouth drew up into a crooked smile. Oh, you know, little of this, little of that, he said, licked his bottom lip. Draco's eyes widened. Did Potter just flirt with me? What the fuck are you? Draco began, but Potter forcibly shoved him against the wall and crushed his mouth into Draco's. Draco meant to push Potter away. He meant to punch him in his stupid, ugly face and storm out of the room of requirement. He meant to do both of those. He certainly didn't mean to moan. He felt himself growing hard and began to kiss Potter back. Like that, don't you? Potter purred into his ear as his hand snaked down to the growing bulge in Draco's school robes. This is a much more productive way to work out some of that tension between us. What do you think? Then he sank to his knees, unfastened Draco's robes, and took Draco into his mouth. Up until that point, Draco had still meant to end this. He was an 18-year-old boy full of hormones who hadn't had sex. Sorry, I had an itch. That hadn't had sex with anyone except himself since 6th year. And Potter was surprisingly talented with his mouth. What was one shag between former enemies? He had passed the point of caring who was doing it and focused instead on the fact that it was happening. He could feel himself getting close. Potter pulled off and stood up abruptly, leaving Draco feeling very frustrated. Not yet. Potter whispered, I want you to. Me. Frig, man. Draco simply groaned in response as his hands began to fumble with Potter's clothing. As fingers began working on his clothes, the clothes were discarded haphazardly around the room. The two fell onto the shaggy rug by the fire. It was every bit as soft as it looked. Draco's brain had time to process before Draco was doing delightfully lewd things to him, and he was no longer thinking at all. It was after he got himself dressed that he realized something was very, very wrong. The sex had been fantastic, and he was still on a post-orgasmic high. A strong sense of calm had overcome him. The sensation was so alien to him that it took him a while to acknowledge it for what it was. He turned, silly grin plastered on his face, to Potter and felt every drop of calm drain from him. For lying on the rug, stark naked, and smirking wasn't Potter, but Pansy Parkinson. "No," Draco said, tears prickling in his eyes. She simply laughed as if taunting him. "Surprise," she mocked. "What?" Draco said. His brain was struggling to process just what was happening. "Oh, don't look so shocked, darling," Pansy smirked. "I'd always wanted what there was between you and that mudblood-loving freak. Oh, just wait until the rest of the house hears about that you have a thing for Potter. I'm sure Theo and Greg, in particular, will be just delighted to know you wanted the boy who's responsible for landing their fathers in Azkaban. I'll make you regret ever having betrayed us, Draco. You had sex with Pansy Parkinson, thinking it was me, and she was doing it for some kind of sick revenge against you?" Harry yelled. "What the hell were you thinking, Malfoy? I don't even know where to start with just how twisted this is." He ran a hand over his face. "Did you seriously think I'd drag you into the room requirement for sex? I'm not even gay. And even if I was, do you really think I'd choose you as the ideal person to have a quickie in between classes?" He realized that Malfoy was extremely close to tears, and he was staring at the floor, very white, and biting hard on his lip. Harry found he didn't care. "Okay, so you slept with Parkinson, who was polyjuice potioned as me. We'll deal with that later. Professor, this still doesn't explain how I managed to get pregnant." "As to that, Harry, I believe I know," Professor McGonagall said. "However, I will ask that you're both quiet and refrain from interruptions whilst I explain. Harry, Draco, as you both know, the change that happens when a dose of polyjuice is consumed is not an instant one. It is a continuous change over a short space of time. The reverse is also true. But polyjuice begins to wear off, a person returns to themselves in stages rather than immediately." Harry thought back to the numerous occasions he'd taken polyjuice. Each time he'd notice his own features returning through the disguise. A return of his own messy hair, and maybe his eyes returning to their own color. He remembered Ron in their second year disguised as Crabbe, but his own hair returning, whilst in the Slytherin common room. He understood what McGonagall meant in this case, which is one of the extremely unlikeliness. Miss Parkinson's body was in the process of shifting from male back to female when she conceived. Parts of her had returned to her female self enough to conceive, yet she was still in the body of Harry. The fertilized egg, therefore, contained Harry's DNA, not hers. Harry couldn't help thinking that this was perhaps the most fucked up thing he'd heard since Dumbledore had revealed the existence of Voldemort's Horcruxes to him 2 years ago. Malfoy had had sex with what he thought was Harry, got the girl pregnant during the effect of Polyjuice Potion wearing off, and then, Professor, how did I end up pregnant? Why not Parkinson, as she's the one who actually conceived? Harry asked, thoroughly confused. Ah, Mr. Potter, and there lies the magic of the Room of Requirement, Professor McGonagall said. Had this, copulation occurred anywhere else in the castle, pregnancy would have been impossible due to how the human body is designed, and the particular act Malfoy and Miss Parkinson engaged in cannot and does not ever result in pregnancy in either heterosexual or homosexual relations, except in an extremely rare situation such as this. Miss Parkinson, obviously feeling particularly vindicative towards Draco at the moment, was wishing to hurt Draco and make his life complicated as much as she could. The room apparently obliged. She paused and reached for a glass of water on her desk. Harry had a very uncomfortable feeling in his stomach. He knew very well what the Room of Requirement was capable of. He looked at his professor as she took a sip of water before continuing. It ensured Miss Parkinson conceived. After all, becoming a parent at 18 would be extremely difficult. However, once Miss Parkinson began to return to herself, the conception faced a very real critical threat. You see, once Miss Parkinson was completely back to normal, her DNA would have interwoven with that of yours and Draco's in the embryo, which would have resulted in the spontaneous abortion. Oof. So the room removed it from her and replaced it into you. That's better. Harry as the true natural parent. I suppose one could say it took a form of apparition, if you will. I dare say Mr. Malfoy and yourself, both being male, confused the room, as it was unsure who make the transfer to. But I suspect that as Mr. Malfoy was the one impregnating Miss Parkinson in the first place, it selected you as the carrier. Merlin on a broomstick, Harry said, fully deciding in that moment that sometimes magic was a meddlesome force that should keep its big fat nose out of people's lives. Would Pansy have known this? Malfoy said, and Harry noticed he was shaking violently. He also had a tear track running down his left cheek, and was still refusing to even glance at Harry. Did she do this on purpose? Get pregnant, you mean? Almost certainly not, Professor McGonagall replied. It's far more likely she just wanted to play a very vicious trick on you. It's not something that's been documented. I myself am only aware of this because Albus told me about a case here in Dumbledore 200 years ago, which troubled the headmaster of the time deeply. But I take it your relationship with Mrs. Parkinson is still not a good one, Draco. Malfoy shook his head, and Harry thought there were only 2 times he'd ever seen him look worse: the night of Dumbledore's death, and when Harry saved him from the fiend fire. He looked worse now than he had when the headmistress had informed Draco that Harry was pregnant with his child. Pansy cooked it up with the other Slytherins, Malfoy said. She apparently thought it would be a hysterical joke and teach me a lesson. Blaise told me about it afterwards. She got one of Potter's hairs from somewhere and snuck a spare set of Gryffindor robes out of the laundry, and, well, you know the rest. And since then, I've been... Malfoy paused and took a deep breath. You know what? It doesn't matter. It was at this point Harry felt the unwanted, but nonetheless real pang of sympathy. Draco was being tormented by his house for his family's last-minute defection from Voldemort, a decision which had landed many of the students' parents in Azkaban, whilst keeping the Malfoys out of it. And Parkinson had given them the perfect tools with which to carry out their torment. Merlin, he detested that bitch, but by the look on Professor McGonagall's face, it was clear she, too, was feeling sympathetic. If you're still experiencing problems with your house, Draco, she said kindly, I can have you removed from the dungeons by nightfall. There is a private room on the 5th floor next to the portrait of Eris, and I'll have the house elves move your belongings shortly. Thank you, Professor. Draco replied, and Harry could feel the sheer relief in his voice. Madame promptly cleared her throat, nervously. There is something I need to discuss with you, she said. I can perform a termination in the pregnancy. Obviously, it's something you'll need to talk about and agree upon. But we can abort it if you wish. No! Harry and Draco both interrupted at the same time. Harry looked over at Malfoy quickly. It was the first time since they'd entered the room that Malfoy was looking directly at him. He offered the other boy the smallest hint of a smile, which was returned. Then I suggest we leave it for today. This has come as a major shock to both of you, and I need to speak with Pansy. Don't worry, I will not be relieving the consequences of her actions to her. Revealing the consequences of her actions to her. Professor McGonagall said, in response to the alarmed look from both boys. I will, however, say this is to you both. You're having a child together, something that will connect you both for the rest of your lives. You need to be able to be in the same room with one another and be able to be civil towards one another without resorting to name-calling and dueling. You're dismissed. Harry had just reached the bottom of the spiral staircase when he heard Malfoy calling his name. Can we talk, please? Malfoy asked. His voice was soft, dead, as if he'd given up. Not now, Harry replied, only slightly surprised to hear the defeat echoed in his own voice. I'm exhausted and I feel sick. I've had a shock of a lifetime thrown on me. It's been an extremely eventful few hours. I think holding a polite conversation with you right now would be an icing on the cake of weirdness and probably cause the universe to implode on itself to something. I'm going to go up to the Gryffindor tower and crawl into bed. We'll talk later. Draco looked as if he was about to argue, but he shut his mouth and simply nodded. Tomorrow, then? Tomorrow, agreed Harry. And Potter? Harry turned around again. I'm really fucking sorry. Tomorrow, Malfoy, Harry said, ignoring the apology, and turned once more and headed for the stairs. Only once he was completely alone in the corridor did he allow the emotion that he'd been threatening to overcome him for the last couple of hours surface. All he'd wanted was 1 year, just 1 year at Hogwarts, where he could be a normal 18-year-old boy, study, maybe have a few dates, land himself in detention, spend time with his friends. Yet once again he was as far removed from normal as it was possible to be. He blinked angry tears from his eyes, cast a silencing spell around him, and let out an almighty scream of fury. Chapter 3. Potter is pregnant. Harry returned to the common room. He headed straight for his dormitory and was followed instantly by a very worried-looking Ron and Hermione. He saw Ginny sitting on the couch, cuddled into Neville, and giving him a concerned look, and wished not for the first time that things had worked out differently between them. But they had been apart for a year, and Ginny had grown close to Neville during Snape's reign and their reformation of the DA. Besides, he thought bitterly, she'd hardly want a boyfriend knocked up with the spawn of Draco Malfoy, would she? They were still close, but they had a familial rather than romantic relationship now. No sooner had Ron closed the dormitory door behind him, checked that Seamus and Dean weren't there, he and Hermione pounced on Harry. He warily crawled up on his bed and retold the story about the pansy Parkinson had done, how the rumor requirement had worked its magic, and how Draco had taken the news. Madame Pomfrey offered us a chance to terminate, Harry said. She said we'd have to talk it over, come to a mutual decision, but Malfoy and I both want to continue with the pregnancy. He smiled, the sort of smile that was merely rueful and not one of happiness. I think it's the first thing we've ever anonymously agreed upon in our lives. Well, this explains Parkinson's bizarre behavior on the Hogwarts Express, mate, Ron said, and Harry felt his eyes widen. Of course! He should have thought of that before, but then again, he had rather of a lot of other things to think about in the last few hours. On the journey to school, Pansy had burst into the compartment Harry was sitting in with his friends, thrown her arms around Harry, and begged for forgiveness for trying to sell him out to Voldemort, before planting a huge kiss on his mouth and winding her hand in his hair. He'd thrown her off straight away and sent a stinging jinx at her. But not apparently before she'd managed to yank out a few hairs from his head for the Polyjuice, obviously. And Malfoy really thought he was with you? Hermione spluttered. She, of the three of them, was the calmest about Harry's pregnancy. But the method of conception had left her absolutely enraged. Ugh! Harry, I've just realized something. That means Malfoy's seen you naked. He's seen you know, Ron said, hopefully indicating that the vague area of Harry's groin with an open hand. I mean, I know it's not you, but was your body, right? He let out a shudder. Hermione turned tomato red, and Harry groaned loudly and covered his face with his hands. Great, Harry drawled. I'll just add that to a list of reasons Harry Potter is never leaving his bed again, shall I? Are you coming down for dinner, Harry? Hermione asked. Harry shook his head. I just said I'm never leaving my bed. Hermione gave him a stern look. Sorry, Hermione, I'm not hungry. I just want sleep. And I'll hex the first person who says I have to eat for the sake of the baby, he said, and Hermione quickly shut her mouth, evidently having just opened it to utter those exact words. He closed his eyes and felt Hermione remove his glasses and run her fingers through his hair once in a tender manner before placing his blanket over him. Ron patted him on the shoulder and muttered something about bringing Harry up some food in case he changed his mind. And then the room fell silent as his friends left, despite the events of the day giving his brain enough to think about the hours. The fact it was only early evening, Harry found he was so tired he fell straight asleep, where he didn't so much as stir until the following morning. Harry woke up late the following morning. He'd fully intended to miss breakfast and took a long, soothing shower, but he didn't eat since the previous morning, and what he'd consumed then had all been thrown up, and the food Ron had brought up for him the previous evening was no longer edible. Reluctantly, he hauled himself out of bed, washed, dressed quickly, and followed Ron down to the common room, where flustered-looking Hermione was already waiting for them. I'm glad you're coming down for breakfast, Harry, she said warmly, her face breaking into a smile when she saw him. Harry realized that she was genuinely worried about him, and vowed to make an effort to eat properly in the future. To stop her nagging constantly, if nothing else. The trio made their way to the Great Hall, where Harry noticed Malfoy was looking at him. He was sat at the end of the Slytherin table with the first years, evidently given up all pretense that all was well in Slytherin now that Harry and the headmistress knew what was going on. Harry turned away from his gaze quickly and reached for a couple slices of toast. He actually felt hungry and was grateful for the sensation. He was buttering his second slice of toast when Pansy Parkinson, tears streaming down her ugly face, marched into the hall and strode up to Draco and began yelling at him at the top of her lungs. Traitor! And on top of that, you're a snitch as well! You'll pay for this, Draco! She shrieked. McGonagall expelled me last night 'cause you can't keep your treacherous mouth closed. I hope you're happy with yourself, Draco, because I swear it'll be the last time you are. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the great hall, as excited chatter spec- uh, speculating as to what on earth the Bint could have done to earn expulsion broke out amongst the 4 house tables. Malfoy looked supremely unconcerned with his ex-girlfriend's public display. Harry noted, but underneath he knew the Slytherin would be affected. He wore his Malfoy mask too well sometimes. Aside from the earlier excitement, breakfast was normal for Harry until the inevitable happened. "Hey, Seamus, can you pass me the scrambled eggs, please?" Neville asked innocently. Seamus handed them over, holding them in front of Harry for the briefest of seconds as he did, but it was enough. Harry felt his stomach lurch in an extremely unpleasant manner as the smell of eggs reached his nostrils, and he threw his hand over his mouth. "Are you okay, Harry?" Ron asked, clearly worried. Harry closed his eyes and shook his head, hoping the absence of the eggs, which were now several feet away from him, would stave off the nausea. But he knew it wasn't going to be enough. Leaving all his school things and his cloak behind, he left his seat and dashed out of the Great Hall at a run, Ron closely on his heels, whilst Hermione paused and collected up his belongings before following them. None of them noticed a concerned pair of gray eyes following them, as he, too, stood from his seat and left. Harry just made it in time. He flung open the door and near the nearest cubicle and threw up every last bit of breakfast noisily into the toilet bowl. Mental note: keep eggs away from me from now on, he said rather breathlessly. As Ron handed him a wad of toilet paper to wipe his mouth, Ron gave a nervous chuckle that didn't really contain any humor. Noted. Look, Harry, shall we go see Madame Pomfrey again? There must be a potion or something you can take that will help with the sickness. Ron helped Harry stand, who was surprised to find he was rather shaky, and Harry pulled a chain of the toilet paper and began to pair. The pair left the bathroom. He was unsurprised to find Hermione waiting anxiously outside. He was surprised, however, to find Draco looking just as anxious. "Potter, are you all right?" he asked, as he handed Harry a bottle of water that he had collected from the Slytherin table for him. Harry reached out and took the water, pulled off the lid, and took a huge drink, feeling dehydrated from all the vomiting. "Yeah, no thanks to you," he replied as he replaced the cap on the bottle and pointedly patted his abdomen, but his voice lacked venom. "If I'm going to do that every mealtime, it's not going to be to take people long to work out there's something up." "Is it?" "Well, Nate, soon you'll, be all fat and stuff. You'll, they'll all work it out then anyway." Ron hopefully supplied. Before Harry and Malfoy stared at him, slightly open-mouthed, whilst Hermione grabbed both of Ron's arm and dragged him off to Charms with a loud, "Honestly, Ronald, have you no tact?" having Harry still recovering from the vomiting bout, alone with Malfoy. So, Parkinson's been expelled then, Harry said, choosing to completely bypass Ron's insightful interjection. Good, Draco replied, but didn't elaborate. They began walking towards Charms together in silence. Look, Malfoy, we better not walk into class together. This whole situation is deep into bizarro world as it is, without everyone thinking we're friends or something. Bizarro world? Malfoy repeated mildly amused. Never mind, Harry said quickly. My point is, well, you get it. I've got a free period after lunch. Can we talk then? If you haven't died from if I haven't died from puking up by then. Sure. Where shall we meet? Anywhere but the room of requirement, Harry said drily, great gratified to see a huge flush of mortification creep on Malfoy's face. You've got your own room now, haven't you? Behind the portrait of Edison Dis- Disnoma Disnomia? I'll meet you there. Fine. And said Malfoy. And Potter, if there's anything I can do. Unless you happen to have a time turner and can go back to the time in time and not have sex with Parkinson in the first place, then no, there isn't, Harry replied curtly, and turned without a backwards glance and strode into Charm's classroom and took a seat beside Hermione, and leaving Malfoy slightly stunned looking and standing alone in the corridor. Harry finished lunch thankfully, a non-offensive meal of roasted ham, mashed potatoes, and vegetables that he devoured and kept down, much to relief of his stomach, and made his way to the 5th floor and found the painting easily and sat down on the floor waiting for Malfoy to finish lunch and join him. He didn't have to wait long. 5 minutes later, Malfoy appeared. He held out a hand to help Harry off the floor. Harry looked at it, laughed, and got himself up with ease, ignoring the offered support. I'm pregnant, not an invalid, he said, noticing Malfoy's slight wince in the word pregnant. Draco whispered the password to the portrait, and it swung open. He stepped inside, and Harry followed. The room was but homey. It was neutral in decor, giving no indication as to its inhabitants' house. There was a comfortable-looking bed, an armchair, a wardrobe, and a set of drawers, a desk, and a chair in the corner, the former of which was already covered in sheets of parchment and textbooks. A large window on the far wall revealed a clear view of Hagrid's hut and the Forbidden Forest. The room was meticulously clean and tidy, but still carried a slight smell that indicated that had not been used in many years. A small door on the other side led to what must be a bathroom. Harry assumed overall he thought the room was rather lovely. He sat down in the armchair, resting his head on the back. On the back. He still felt very tired, despite sleeping for 14 hours straight the previous night. He wondered when he wouldn't feel tired again. With 7 months of pregnancy left, then a newborn, he quickly banished the rather unpleasant thought from his mind. Malfoy sat down on the chair by his desk and was looking incredibly awkward. Harry noticed he was struggling for eye contact. "I meant it yesterday," he said after a period of uncomfortable silence. "When I said I was sorry." "Thanks, but that doesn't really make me feel a whole lot better, to be honest," Harry replied. "Malfoy, what the fuck did you think you were doing?" He realized it was starting to get angry to do what you did. "Were you thinking at all? Why on earth would you think I'd want to sleep with you? We hate each other for Merlin's sake." "Yes, Potter, you've made it perfectly clear you find me repulsive," Draco snapped. "I wasn't thinking, okay? Look, since May, everyone hates me. Your side hates me because my family chose to side with the Dark Lord. I have this fucking thing on my arm." Draco rolled up his left sleeve, revealing the dark mark. "Not as black as it once was, but still obvious. And still obvious. My father's side hates me for what they see as betrayal. We've been spat at, hexed, we've received death threats and numerous howlers, and to be frank, no one would cast aguamente on us if we were on fire. For 10 crazy minutes, someone wanted me. Or at least, I thought they did. It didn't matter who that person was. I got carried away. It wasn't my brightest idea, alright?" And there was that uncomfortable, unwanted pang of sympathy in Harry's chest. Again. Lucius he had very little sympathy for, but Malfoy and his mother, that was very different. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, look, it's happened. I'm really pissed off that you did that, and let's not pretend it's not completely weird, but there are other things we need to discuss. The fact that two people who don't like each other are somehow going to have to learn to get along because they have a bloody child together, being priority number one." "I don't hate you," Draco almost whispered. Harry blinked. "What?" he began, but Draco put up a hand to quiet him. "I can't hate you, Potter. You saved my life. The room was burning. I was about to die. And you came back for me. I'd never been so glad to see anyone in my life, ever, as I was when I saw you on that broomstick. You spoke up for my mother and me at our trial and kept us out of Azkaban. You were the one who finally rid us all of the Dark Lord. I wish I could go back to hating you. I wish I could take delight in the fact that I've, well, and truly stuffed up your life. But I can't. I'm amazingly grateful to you. If truth if truth be told. Harry just stared at Malfoy. That was by far the most candid he'd ever seen him be. The annoying pang of sympathy he felt was growing. "You've not stuffed up my life," he said finally. "It's not like I never wanted kids. It's just that in my head I was going to have them at 25 once I was a qualified Aura. Ginny, who would have been my wife by then, was going to be their mother. I most certainly wasn't going to be the one pregnant with them, and I wasn't ever expecting to end up as a single dad at 18. And I currently never expected to have a child with you. Harry Potter's grand life plan has disappeared as abruptly as if someone cast Reducto at it. Well, I need you to know I really am truly sorry," Draco said with obvious sincerity. "I know," replied Harry. "This isn't how I imagined ever having children, either," Draco said. "I expected to be married off to some pure-blood witch, probably some Bixbatons girl from an old family who'd had nothing to do with the war that father chose for me. We'd be married after a brief courtship. I'd have the obligatory heir, a son naturally, and follow father into his business dealings, or maybe open my own apothecary or something. Well, she spent her days launching and spending the contents of the Malfoy vault. I wasn't supposed to have a child with a half-blood vanquisher of my father's master, who is also male. I guess your father won't be hearing about this," Harry said, unable to stop himself. The corners of Draco's mouth turned up in amusement. "He'll have to know eventually, I guess," he replied. "After all, this is his grandchild, but no. For the time being, mum's the word." "If you say so, Malfoy," Harry said, experiencing a hideous jolt when the words Lucius Malfoy and grandchild were uttered in the same sentence. He checked his watch. "Shit! I've got herbology in 10 minutes. I really need to get going." He bent down and grabbed his school stuff, letting out a small gasp of discomfort as the movement caused a twinge on the lower abdomen. "I'm all right," he said quickly, noticing Draco looked as worried as he had that morning when Harry was throwing up. "Madame Pomfrey said I might get ligament pain. All normal, apparently." He swung his bag over his shoulder. "It's going to take a long time to put our history behind us," he added, "but I'm willing to try if you are. But for the baby, if nothing else." He couldn't yet say our baby. That was just far too strange. He offered Malfoy a small smile and held out his hand, and Draco looked at the outstretched and quirked an eyebrow. He nonetheless took Harry's hand. "We'll try to take to get along. Draco agreed, for the baby. See you, Harry said, and realizing he was late, made his way quickly out of Draco's room and began heading towards the greenhouse. Are you okay, Harry? Ginny asked as she approached him. Harry was sat by the lake enjoying the fresh autumn chill against his skin. The coolness washing over his face was combating some of the nausea he had once felt since dinner. The sun was very low in the sky now, casting a pink and gold glow over the Hogwarts grounds. The sky above was a dark navy blue. The hint of the stars contained within it just beginning to peep through. Ginny shivered slightly and wrapped her cloak around herself tightly. Hermione said you wanted to be alone for a bit, but Ron said you were down here that I should talk to you. Do you mind if I sit down? Harry smiled at his ex-girlfriend and patted the ground next to him. Ginny sat down. Harry, is there something wrong with you? She blurted out, and Harry could hear the worry in her voice. You've been quiet and pale for a few weeks. You missed lunch and dinner yesterday and returned to the common room yesterday afternoon looking like death. You dashed out of the great hall this morning, ate breakfast and were obviously being sick. And then you ate nothing at dinner this evening. What's going on? Nothing, Jen. Harry lied. He'd never been good at lying, particularly to those who was closest to him. So he didn't really know why he'd expected Ginny to believe him. She very clearly didn't. Instead, she snorted in contempt. I suppose nothing is the reason you spent all day in the hospital wing yesterday, and why Ron and Hermione took you there after dinner, too. Harry, she said, and Harry didn't know what her voice contained more of, bitterness, sadness, or fear. Yes, I saw you going in there. I even called your name, but I didn't think you heard me. I know. I'm not your girlfriend anymore, but I still care about you, you know. And I thought we were still close. We are, Jen. Harry replied. He reached out for her hand, but she snatched it away. Then tell me, Harry, if you're ill, then you need your friends. Please. Harry, I'm worried about you. Harry thought back to what Ron had said about that morning. People were going to have to know eventually. And Ginny wasn't just people. She was someone he loved. He took a deep breath. Okay. You're right. Ginny, I'm pregnant. Ginny's eyes narrowed, and her lips became extremely thin. Fine, she said coolly. If you don't want to tell me, tell me what's wrong, that's your business. But there's no excuse for poking fun at me, you know. She stood up and made to walk but Harry grabbed her. Ginny, please, I'm serious. Look, sit back down and I'll explain the entire joke that is now my life to you. There must have been something in his voice or on his face or both that was resigned and open, because Ginny's one own face suddenly softened, her mouth opening in shock. She instantly sat back down. "You're really pregnant," she whispered in disbelief. Yeah. And you want to hear the punchline? Draco Malfoy is the other father. Malfoy? Ginny spluttered. Harry noticed she had turned extremely white. How did you get... I mean, did you and he have... Are you... I'll tell you in a minute. No, we didn't, and no, I'm not gay. No, I'm not. Gay? I mean, he said. Harry said. That is what you're asking, right? Harry nodded. Ginny nodded. Harry tried not to think about the reasons why his ex was so ready to believe he might seek for the other team. Remember when Parkinson burst into our carriage and kissed me on the way to the school? Well, that was the beginning of this. He talked for the best part of an hour, explaining exactly what had happened, and Ginny listening intently to every word. The sun had completely set by now, and the temperature dropped significantly. Ginny snuggled into Harry, shivering noticeably now, and he wrapped his cloak around them both as they lit their wands to combat the sheet of darkness that had fallen. Moonlight was reflecting off the lake, giving the immediate surrounding area an ethereal glow in front. It was every inch that the picture of a romantic scene, the boy and the girl cuddled together in the moonlight, except for the fact that the boy was telling the girl he was knocked up with the spawn of a Malfoy, and the girl was going to return to the castle later and cuddle with Longbottom. That's why I went to see Madame Pomfrey after dinner, Harry said. Morning sickness. Which, by the way, is a stupid name for it, as it should really be called morning, afternoon, and evening sickness. Apparently gets worse from about 7 or 8 weeks, which is why I'm really struggling at the moment. I just feel queasy most of the time, even if I'm not physically sick. McGonagall has informed the staff of what's going on, so if I have to dash out of lesson, they know why. And Pomfrey gave me a potion this evening that contains an infusion of ginger, peppermint, and chamomile, which is supposed to help with the sickness. It's taken the edge off, I guess. But suddenly the anti-sickness potion can't be taken in pregnancy because the foxglove is dangerous to babies. Apparently it eases off after about 12 weeks. Why is it that something like this happens to... Why is it when something happens, it always happens to you? Ginny asked, and Harry laughed. A sardonic laugh, without much amusement. McGonagall said pretty much the same thing. I guess I'm just destined not to ever be normal. His hand began stroking the grass, and he absently started plucking at its roots, twirling it braids between his fingers until he was sure his hands were going to be covered in grass stains. He was he was I was stupid to think I'd ever have what everyone else had. I'm glad that you're with Neville now, Ginny. He's not a complete freak. I mean, even if we had got back together, you wouldn't want me now, expecting Draco Malfoy's baby, would you? Don't say that, Ginny chastised, and Harry noticed her voice was unsteady. You're not a freak. Never think that. She sniffed loudly, and Harry suspected she was crying. He instantly felt guilty. I, I am really sorry we didn't work out. It was no one's fault, he replied. That year, he replied. That year, apart changed everything. It changed us. I guess we just weren't meant to be. I do love you, Harry, Ginny said. Harry smiled at her. She was bathed in moonlight, too, now, making her look like she was carved from the most expensive marble. She was beautiful, truly beautiful, and yet, for the first time in 2 years, Harry realized the monster in his closet that he felt every time he saw or thought of Ginny was missing. They really were over. For good. And he felt okay with it. He suddenly felt a lot calmer, as if no worry had been left, that one worry had been lifted. I love you too, Ginny, he replied, and kissed the top of her head. And he did love her. He loved her as much as he loved Ron and Hermione and the other Weasleys. And that was enough. They sat together for a long time in comfortable silence. The hoot of a nearby owl jolted Harry from his thoughts, alerting him to just how late it was. He aimed his wand at his watch and, surprised to see it was nearly 10. He'd been sitting at the lake for nearly 4 hours. We'd better head back before Hermione sends out a search party, Harry said. Come on. They both stood up and brushed the earth from their clothes and headed toward the castle. Life doesn't always work out how you think it will, Harry thought as he walked, and maybe that's okay. He was alive. Sometimes never thought he'd be this. He'd be. He never thought he'd be this time last year. Had wonderful, supportive friends he loved and who loved him, and the baby he was carrying, whilst still not seeming to at all real, still the biggest shock he'd ever received. Well, maybe that, too, was a gift. It was his family, his blood. Perhaps things would work out all right after all. Okay. Thank you guys. I'm going to end it here. It's been a while. And that was only chapter 3, so 1 through 3. And there's how many chapters? 14. Oh boy. So I hope you liked it. give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below which part was your favorite. And don't be a stranger. Tell me if you give me a specific ship like Baku Deku or whatever. And if you don't have a book or a recommendation, just say that you don't, so that I don't keep on asking, oh, do you have a specific book type? But if you do, please say it in the comment, the same one that says, can you do Baku Deku? And I look at it, and I'll look at it and make sure if I like it or not. Okay, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Give it a big thumbs up. Thank you for everything you do for me and my channel. And you are the best squad in the world. I love you guys so much. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. I know this is really strange, but happy Mother's Day. And at this part of the video, you can show to your mother or mother figure, happy Mother's Day to you all, if you are a mother, or you're going to be a mother, or you have one. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you just have a great day with your mother. Just spend time with her. Tell her how much you appreciate her. If not with gifts, with love or a card. At least just give her a phone call or a text, just to know that you're thinking of her. And right after this message, I am playing a video of me giving my mom a Mother's Day gift. And I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much for all the help and support you give me on my channel. I would not have done it without you. Bye. Love you guys. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. That's all I gotta say. Chapter 2. Knocked Up Harry Potter. These titles, man. Hold on. I have to do my pepis. Chapter 2. Knocking Up Harry Potter. Can't do that without smiling. I'm so sorry. Technically, you could throw up bile, but that's still something, but very painful. On your throat, anyways. Oh, bitch, you better be nervous, bro. You better be nervous. I'm sorry. I have a theory. So this is going to be at the end, so the theory is already, probably proven. That I think they had it. They, finally had it. And what Malfoy did is that he obliviated all the feelings that Potter had of him and all the memories that they shared that were intimate away. Or he put it in a pensive so that Potter can't see it, or remember it. But that's just my theory, so it might not come true. Anyways, let me redo this. You know how this should have gone? You know how this should have gone? It should have gone. When it comes to Potter, Mr. Malfoy, we should all know by now that the impossible is achievable. And pretty soon, like any second, he could sprout rings for all we fucking know. Just like stupid shit like that. Just like anything is possible with him. Like, you think of it, it probably could happen. Frig. Oh gosh, who is it? Why do I want to think it's Blaze? Why do I want to think it's Blaze who fucked this up? Like, it's either Blaze, George, Fred, and then Pansy. I'm thinking it's Pansy, but at the same time, it might not be. I want to look ahead. No. It's a girl. I know it's a girl, so there you go. How you know it's not Potter? Sorry. He's a. I love that's the. I'm gonna keep this in, but like I love that's the factor. Like he's surprisingly talented with his mouth, so it's good. It's all good to go. Potter pulled. Oh gosh, are we going through all of this again? Oh, thank the Lord. Oh gosh, I was right. I was right. It was one of them. Okay. Anyways. I'm crying because it's so awkward. I'm definitely going to like record my friend's reaction if I read this to him. This is a good story. I ain't gonna lie. I kind of like it. Like it a lot. Yeah, yeah. But I have to say, I feel really bad. Like, then again, I've always wanted to have kids. So, like, I see there's a problem, yes. Because it's with someone he doesn't like, but besides, he thought bitterly. She'd hardly want a boyfriend knocked up with the spawn. The spawn. No! Shut up, you dick. Do not say that. Sorry, I just spat all over my computer. All over it. Okay, sorry. Um, uh, yeah. No, no thanks to you. What the fuck is your problem? I'm getting angry now, and that's saying something. I'm getting angry. Yes, the girl who fucked him over, and then it turned out to fuck you over. He didn't mean to. Mm, don't be mean, please. Be nice. He bit down on the boy's neck. Wait, what? What? I was not ready for this. This is literally the second. Oh gosh. We're going into mega and alpha territory. I love it, but at the same time, it gets so like drama ridden. I'm just like, great. even my alarm was like, nah. Not today. Oh gosh. You just had to start with sex, didn't ya? Damn it. Ugh. Okay. And did the last thing Harry was expecting. She took him into her arms and said, if only I was the one who took care of you and don't give you to that horrible family. But no, Dumbledore knows best. Of course he does. Like, he does. Oh yeah, give him to a horrible family that beats him and like abuses him for frickin' like 11 years. Yeah, that's totally okay. But if I took care of him, I would have had him, like, had the best thing for him. He would have known about wizard culture. He would have been best in the class, and he would have been out of trouble as much. But no. I'm sorry, I had to do that for my girl McGonagall. I had to do that for her. Anyways, that was an outtake, but I had to do it. You know I had to do it. Okay, I got you something for Mother's Day. Not the fake
tissue. Awesome. JCP. And it's a box.
It is a box.
And there's this way. As you can see, it's been a while since I've opened a.
It's well, yeah.
Oh. Is that Le'Veon?
That's real amethyst. It's a size 7.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I know.
But we'll just fit it.
You like it?
Thank you, honey. It's pretty. Does it fit you too?
Not well, one of them, but it doesn't. There you go. You like it?
I do very much.
Happy Mother's Day.
Okay.